TaxJar is a sales tax compliance software for which we've created an integration with Infigo. This allows our users to calculate sales tax rates during the ordering process. Now, traditionally, this functionality was only available to our US customers, who often have to deal with complex sales tax rates between states. However, we're now rolling out this functionality to all countries supported by the TaxJar API. This covers the EU, Canada, the US, Australia, and the UK. If you'd like to take advantage of the TaxJar integration, then you will require the professional version of their product, which then includes the API lookups. At the time of writing, TaxJar do offer a 30-day trial of their professional version, which does include API access if you want to give this a try. So to begin, we're going to navigate to our tax provider's screen. If enabled, a TaxJar entry will be displayed on this tax provider's screen. If this is your first time configuring TaxJar with Infigo, you likely need to enable it on your platform. Please submit a support ticket under a new module inquiry to request this. And then we'll let you know once this has been enabled. So we need to mark the TaxJar plugin as the primary tax provider. We do this by clicking select next to the relevant row. So by default, you'll likely have fixed tax rate provider marked as the primary provider. Just locate the TaxJar row when you've got it activated and click on select. Next, we need to actually configure the TaxJar plugin with a few additional bits of information. So sticking on the same row, go across to the configure icon. So next, you're going to need to obtain your API key from your TaxJar account. So begin by navigating to TaxJar and logging into your account. And then you want to identify the TaxJar API token page. Now, at the time of writing, this is located under the account section and then TaxJar API. But of course, this is subject to move. Once you've accessed this page, you'll have access to a live token, along with the ability to generate and use a sandbox token, which you can use for testing purposes. So you want to copy the relevant token, which you can use this button on the right-hand side, and then return to the TaxJar configuration page within Infigo. Input the copied token into the API key field here, so just copy and paste it. And then we can look at some of the other options that we have available. So the next option down is the default tax for invalid address. So here you can specify a default tax value for use if the address is classified as invalid and a price cannot be obtained from TaxJar itself. Next down, we have include city in rates for location call. So this allows further refinement of the rates calculation by including the city field. So this field is drawn from either the default customer address or the taxed based on setting, which I'll show in a few minutes, which is under the tax settings. And this setting allows the selection of the billing, shipping, or a default address. We then have include street for rates for location call. This is the same as the one above, but it's looking at the address one field rather than the city. And then scrolling down again, this is where we have the ability to select the TaxJar plugin to be applicable to different countries. So by default, we have it applied for the United States, and in the case of my platform, the United Kingdom. you'll see that we have all of the other available countries within the TaxJar API, and those can just be activated by clicking the Enable key. And then make sure we click Save at the bottom to store all of those settings. So next, we want to navigate to our tax categories. So products requiring tax calculation by TaxJar require a tax category to be specified. So we can create these on this particular screen. So let's, in this case, make a brand new one. So if I go and add new, and then I'm just going to type in a tax category name. So your tax categories are the different bands of tax that can be applied to products. So on the tax category screen, you are specifying little more than a category name. How this category is used, such as its rate, is specified in other areas of Infigo. Depending on the scenario, a tax category might relate to particular rates, the behavior of a particular country, or in this case, we might simply just create a category specifically to be assigned for TaxJar. And click on Save to store that tax category. Next, I'm going to navigate to my product management. So we must assign a tax category to the products we wish to have the rate calculated by TaxJar. So these options are defined in the product variant settings. The easiest way to access these is by clicking on the plus icon next to your product of interest. And then the table that appears is the product variant settings. So we can click on Edit over on the right-hand side of that table. We then make sure we're on the Info tab, and scrolling quite far down this list, you'll see we have a tax section available. One is the option to make the product tax exempt, so no tax at all. Otherwise, we can select from the available list of tax categories. So you can have multiple selected here, or you can just have one. So I'll select our newly created tax category in this case, and click Save. Finally, to complete this process, we're going to go to our tax settings. So I mentioned this a little earlier on. We do have this tax based on field here, which allows you to choose whether the billing or shipping address of a customer is used for tax purposes. Default can also be selected in this dropdown, at which point the following series of default tax address details are utilized. So these default details also act as a fallback should the primary option not be available. So moving up a little bit, we also have some tax display options. Now there's no requirement to modify these for the TaxJar plugin, however it can be useful in order to see that it's functioning correctly. So in this selection here are a number of display options which will impact how the tax is displayed to the end user whilst they're navigating the front end of your storefront. So you can just select those as you see necessary and then make sure you click Save. So that's our configuration complete in this stage. We're now going to test whether or not the plugin is working. So I'm going to go first to my customer management screen. Now what I've got in my case is a few test users which I've set up. And all I've done in these test users, so if I go into our California one, for example, is I've made sure they've got addresses specified in different locations. In this case, I've done it in different US states, as that's the primary use case for the TaxJar plugin up to this point. So I'm going to impersonate one of these users to view the front end of our storefront as they would. Now, depending on your tax settings, updated tax information will be displayed as early as the homepage itself. So you see, for example, in this case, I've got a few featured products where I've got the price being displayed, including VAT, or including our tax. The basket can also be configured to display the amount of tax calculated, along with the rate drawn from TaxJar. So in this particular case, we can see that I've got my individual products in my basket with the VAT included or the tax included. And also on the right-hand side, you can see I've got different tax rates being brought in, or two different sections. And in this case, we can see two tax fees due to there being different products in the basket being in different tax categories. I'm now going to impersonate a user located in a different state to see if we get a different tax rate being brought through. So I can see there already that I've got some different prices being shown. And if I go back to my basket here, I can see that the rate of tax being brought through differs from what I previously saw. That's because the different rates for the different states are being brought through from TaxJar.